When we think of ancient Egypt, we think of the great pharaohs, the pyramids, the mighty civilization that ruled the Nile for 3,000 years. But what if I told you that Egypt, the most powerful empire of the ancient world, was once conquered and ruled by its southern neighbors? This is the story of the other Nile Valley civilization, a kingdom of mighty archers, warrior queens, and builders of more pyramids than Egypt itself. To understand how Kush conquered Egypt, we have to go back long before they wore the double crown. To the Egyptians, the vast region south of the first cataract of the Nile was a mysterious and valuable land. They called it Ta Seti, the land of the bow, named after its most feared inhabitants, the Kushite archers. This region, which we know as Nubia, was home to advanced cultures long before the time of King Tut. As early as 2500 BCE, the city of Kerma flourished as a powerful rival to Egypt, trading gold, ivory, and ebony. But for centuries, the relationship was one of domination. During Egypt's New Kingdom, around 1500 BCE, the pharaohs launched massive campaigns southward. They crushed Kerma and turned Kush into a colony. The Egyptians built temples and towns, introduced their gods, especially Amun, and exploited the region's vast wealth. It seemed the dream of an independent Kush was dead. But deep in Kushite territory, at a sacred mountain called Jebel Barkal, the seeds of rebellion were being sown. The Egyptians believed this mountain was the home of the god Amun. The Kushites believed it too. Then, around 1070 BCE, Egypt's new kingdom collapsed. The empire withdrew from Kush, leaving a power vacuum. A new kingdom emerged, centered at Napata, right at the foot of Jebel Barkal. They adopted Egyptian writing, religion, and pyramid burial. They saw themselves not as imitators, but as the true inheritors of a great civilization that Egypt itself had abandoned. And by the 8th century BCE, they looked north at their former masters and saw a land in chaos. The conquest, the Black Pharaohs' rise. Egypt was fractured. The once great empire had splintered into petty kingdoms ruled by rival warlords and priests. The Kushite king, a man named Kashta, saw his opportunity. But he was a shrewd operator. He didn't just send an army, he sent his daughter. Kashta used soft power. He had his daughter, Amanirdis I, adopted by the powerful high priests of Amun in Thebes. She was appointed the divine adoratress of Amun, the most powerful religious position in the south. Suddenly, without a single battle, a Kushite princess was the de facto ruler of Upper Egypt. But it was Kashta's son, the great king Paye, who would finish the conquest. Around 728 BCE, a northern Egyptian prince named Tefnacht started swallowing up the smaller kingdoms. Paye watched from Naputa as his sphere of influence was threatened. He didn't see a political dispute. He saw an affront to the divine order of Amun. Paye marched his army north. One by one, the petty kings of Egypt fell. They surrendered to Paye, acknowledging him as their overlord. Paye, having achieved total victory, did something unexpected. He didn't stick around to rule from Memphis or Thebes. He loaded his ships with treasure, said goodbye to the conquered kings, and sailed back home to Napata, perfectly content to let them govern themselves, as long as they paid tribute to him. Paye had conquered Egypt and founded the 25th dynasty, but it was his successors who would truly rule as pharaohs. Ruling as pharaohs, a renaissance. Paye's brother, Shabaka, moved the capital to the ancient Egyptian city of Memphis. He and his successors, the great kings Shebitku, Taharko, and Tanutamun, now ruled an empire that stretched from the confluence of the Blue and White Nile all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. For decades, Egypt had been in decline. The Kushite kings looked back at the Old and Middle Kingdoms, the Golden Ages, and sought to restore them. King Taharko, perhaps the greatest of the Kushite pharaohs, built temples and monuments up and down the Nile, from Karnak to Jebel Barkal. Art flourished. The art of the 25th dynasty is distinctive. You see a revival of classic Egyptian styles, but with a unique Kushite twist. The kings are depicted with realistic, fleshy faces, wearing a tight-fitting cap crown with not one, but two uraeus, the sacred serpents, symbolizing their dual rule over Egypt and Kush. And back in Thebes, the Kushite princesses continued to hold the real political power as the gods' wives of Amun, ensuring that the south remained loyal. For nearly a century, Egypt was stable, prosperous, and united under the black pharaohs of Kush. It was a renaissance, but a new power was rising in the east, a power that would shatter this golden age. The fall. Assyrians and the return south. The Assyrian Empire was the new superpower of the Near East. They had the world's most terrifying army, armed with iron weapons and a ruthless reputation. And they had their eyes on Egypt. In 674 BCE, Taharqa successfully repelled their first attack. But the Assyrians were relentless. They returned in 667 BCE. This time, the Kushites couldn't hold them back. The Assyrians sacked Memphis, drove Taharqa from his capital, and pushed him all the way back to Napata. The Assyrians installed local Egyptian princes as puppets. Tutankhamun, Taharqa's successor, made a final desperate attempt to reclaim Egypt. He briefly succeeded, even killing the Assyrian puppet ruler. The Assyrians returned with a vengeance. They sacked the ancient religious capital of Thebes in 663 BCE. The Kushites were finished in Egypt. They withdrew forever, behind their Nubian cataracts, never to rule the Nile Delta again. The dream of an empire stretching to the sea was over, but the story of Kush was far from finished. In fact, it was about to enter its most fascinating chapter. The Golden Age of Meroe. After a final raid by the Egyptian pharaoh Psammetichus II, around 593 BCE, which may have damaged Napata, the Kushite kings made a strategic decision. They moved their capital further south to a place called Meroe, between the 5th and 6th cataracts. The center of Kushite power shifted, and with it, a new culture was born. While Egypt was conquered by Persians, Greeks, and eventually Romans, Kush remained free and powerful. They looked inward, developing their own unique identity. They stopped using Egyptian writing and developed their own script, Meroitic. It's one of the world's only undeciphered written languages. We can read the letters, but we don't know what the words mean. While they still worshipped Amun, they gave prominence to their own gods, like the fierce, lion-headed warrior god, Apetamak. And perhaps most famously, they built pyramids. Over 200 pyramids stand in the sands of Sudan today, more than in all of Egypt. They are steeper and smaller than their Egyptian cousins, a distinct architectural signature of the Meroitic kingdom. But the real source of their power? Iron. The massive slag heaps found around the city prove it was a center of industrial-scale iron production. They traded these iron tools and weapons, along with their famous gold, with the rest of Africa, Arabia, and India. If you want to help us continue telling these stories of warrior queens, iron empires, and kingdoms that changed the world, then smash that like button right now. It tells the algorithm that history matters. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. The warrior queens who faced Rome. At a time when Rome ruled the Mediterranean, a line of warrior queens, called Candaces or Candaces, ruled Kush. In 24 BCE, the Roman Emperor Augustus sent his legions to conquer the kingdom of Kush. While the Roman governor was distracted in Arabia, the great Candace Amanirenas led her army north. She didn't just defend, she attacked. Kushite forces sacked the Roman garrisons at Aswan, Elephantine, and Philae. They made off with war spoils, including several bronze statues of Augustus himself. The Romans retaliated. They marched south and razed the ancient city of Napata. But Amanirenas refused to surrender. In a famous historical account, when Roman ambassadors came to negotiate, the proud, one-eyed Candace dictated terms. She refused to be a client queen of Rome. The result was a stunning diplomatic victory. The Romans, tired of fighting this tenacious African kingdom on the edge of their world, agreed to a favorable peace treaty. They removed their garrison from the border and canceled all taxes. It was one of the few times Rome ever negotiated as equals with a foreign power. The kingdom of Kush endured for over 1,000 years. It outlasted the Pharaohs, the Persians, the Greeks, and stood toe-to-toe with Rome. Its decline was gradual. Over-farming depleted the land, trade routes shifted, and a new power was rising in the east, the kingdom of Aksum in modern-day Ethiopia. Around 350 CE, the Aksumite king Ezana marched into Meroe, and the kingdom faded into history. For centuries, the story of Kush was forgotten, overshadowed by its more famous northern neighbor. But today, archaeologists are unearthing the truth. They are finding indisputable evidence of an advanced African civilization with powerful armies, vast reach, and a unique cultural identity.